Assalamu alaikum to some of you and peace to the rest of you. I would like to apologize for the time that I've not been able to record. Still somewhat busy, but the school year is winding down, alhamdulillah. I previously have said some very harsh things, and I had to. And I've learned more in this last year as I've worked 2 jobs and been very busy, but also had to hear a lot of what other people are saying. I've learned a lot from my better students even. I make no apologies for what I said earlier about finding non-black Salafi men with black women and being ready to fight them. I make no apologies for this because I have simply found that it's just embedded in the Arab culture, especially in the Gulf. It is embedded in Arab culture to assume that black is always less beautiful than white. It's just stuck. They just can't get rid of that. Well, I can't say they can't, but they won't. And the Salafis here are not much of an exception. They carry the same ideas. Black, dark skin automatically takes away from beauty. And so, as I listen to them, I say to them, you know what? You don't deserve a black woman, so don't marry one later. When you find one that is beautiful, stay away from her. I don't think that they have conquered their biases well enough. And they don't understand that our reactions and our displeasure at their biases is completely normal. It's their biases that are wrong. They haven't even gotten to the point that they can say that. So, since they haven't gotten to that point as a culture and the Salafis are not confronting this bad element, then they should not be allowed to marry black women unless, of course, they're black. Not because there's some kind of racism in Islam. No, it's because they're not confronting the biases in their communities and telling them you're wrong. And you need to stop this. Or you're going to impress somebody one day and Allah's going to burn you for it. They haven't gotten to this point. Evil is too strong sometimes in this community. Other times it's not, but sometimes it is. But today I'm here to talk to you about something else, and this has more to do with gender relations. Some people have said to me, well, what about the black woman and why do people forget about the black woman? It is true at times that people forget about the black women. But a lot of times black men don't. The truth be told, that's not really what happens a lot. And there are times when they don't know what happens to black women. I mean, Sandra Bland, we know about her. We know about Corrine Gaines. We don't know about a whole lot of other black women that have been victimized. We know now about Mrs. Simmons in Alabama, on the Gulf Coast of Alabama, that was disrobed as she was arrested and flung to the ground by the police at a Waffle House. We also know about the lady whose name I forgot, but she was shot at a Waffle House, I think it was in Tennessee, by a white supremacist, along with 2 other black men and a Latin American. And I'm saying this to say that, listen, black folks, black women, you don't need a black feminist movement at all. You do not need one, and not even a little bit. You were used in the 60s and 70s by women, by white women for the most part, to swell their numbers. They were not interested in equal rights for you. And you've seen this. Many of you who've been in the movement long enough have realized this. Men have our places, women have their places. That does not mean that one is inferior to the other, but whoever's in charge has to carry the responsibility as well. And whoever's responsible has to carry the authority and be in charge as well. The two go hand in hand. Because the responsibilities were on men's shoulders, the authority had to be in men's hands. That's all it was. There are places in the world wherein it is unfair. There are places in the world where it is fair. And there are places in the world wherein it is unfair to the men. And they're the ones that got the crap end of the stick. It varies from place to place, in Africa and outside of Africa. It could go either way. It's up to us. But when it comes to the relationship between the races, no, that's pretty much one-sided. White folks oppressing other people, and even oppressing white folks that don't oppress other people. That's what it comes down to. And everybody else being told you better crap on black folks and you better not treat them as equals or we'll come down even harder on you. That's the end of it. That's all that's going on. Nothing else. White supremacy, it's very one-sided and it's global. And throughout the entire world, life is harder the darker you are, period. They've done a very good job, very thorough job of racializing class and making sure that the whites are also the financial upper class globally. They've done this quite well. Exceptions are not the rules, so don't bring them up. Now, I wanted to say about gender relations that to all women, men are now beginning to question these feminist ideas that we have heard in more recent years, maybe within the last or around the time of the last decade. In other words, these ideas that you have to bring in a particular percentage of women into high-paying jobs in corporate America because what we want to know is, are there enough of them studying for these positions? And it's good that they are. Now I'm sure that there are enough of them studying for this. But I think that that rule may have been made before the increase. And I'm just guessing, I admit. But what men are beginning to tell and understand and tell women is, if you're going to climb the corporate ladder in order to increase your salaries and your provisions, that's fine, but understand that when you get up to that top, you ain't going to find no man. That's it. For one, you're not going to want the men you can find. And you ain't going to find the men that you want. They ain't even going to exist. The men you're going to want at that point are going to be taken. And you have a choice. Polygamy, you share your husband, or you stay alone. Or you settle for someone who makes less than you. And that's the one thing many women never do. Settle for a man that makes less money than them. A lot of women say, hell no, I ain't gonna do that. Even if he's okay and he's fine, he's well off and he doesn't need my money, he makes less than me. Absolutely not. I'm not paying for a damn thing. I'll pay to go on a trip with my girls and bone some guy on the vacation. I'll pay that. But if he and I go on a trip, I'm not paying a damn thing. I'm not even paying for one night of a hotel room or one meal. Nothing. I pay for nothing at all. That's what a lot of them are saying. Yet this is talk of gender. This is the age of talking of gender equality, wherein the responsibilities, especially financially, are on the men, but the authority is with the women. So what this means is that the women have the right to tell the men to do something and tell them how to do it a certain way, because the responsibility is on him and the authority is with her. And many men are now beginning to say, wait a minute, this means that in order for us to be with anybody, we got to be henpecked, and we're not being henpecked. I mean, if she can henpeck me, she's going to leave me anyway, because she's going to lose respect for me and start looking for it from another guy. So why should I tolerate being henpecked? And if it's going to be all of that, and if all of these women are going to put us through these crap tests, but it's wrong for us to pass the test and it's wrong for us to fail them, we'll just stay by ourselves anyway. No relationship. You got more and more men deciding that they'll stay by themselves. You even have some of them opting for celibacy at this point. You have others opting for robots and toys. You got men opting for all of these things. And they will not accept to be in a long-term relationship with a woman and will not accept to marry them. I found out that it's gotten into the Muslim world through Turkey. This is what's going on. That in Turkey, as more and more men have begun to be sympathetic with the third wave of feminism, and women have felt emboldened, more and more men have also become disenchanted with this third wave of feminism and women's perspectives, and they have said the things that they want are not justified by what these women are bringing to the table. They're bringing to us feminist ideas and always trying to be different from their husbands, even when they agreed with them, just to prove that they're their own person. Doing these things just to make a point, yet and still the financial responsibility is on the men. Why would we accept to be with anybody? We might as well be by ourselves anyway. That's what was going to happen in the first place. And it's so difficult to meet women in Turkey, and the women know this. So the men are saying it's gone too far, it's gotten too bad, we're going to be by ourselves anyway. We might as well make the best of it and plan on it. And a lot of these men are beginning to discuss this with other men in Turkey. Now, if they're talking about this in Turkey, fortunately, Turkey has its own language and no one else speaks it. But unfortunately, you have many Syrians moving into Turkey, and they're going to learn Turkish, and they also speak Arabic. And they're going to be the gateway through which a lot of these ideas are going to cross into the Arabic-speaking countries. I've already heard one man say, if I wasn't Muslim and I lived in the West, there's no reason I would marry and put myself under woman's control. Absolutely not. I can have a girlfriend and have a romantic relationship that I can end at any time. And sex within that as well. But I would never, ever put myself under her control. When I asked why not, he said, well, I'm a Muslim. I believe that marriage is the right relationship. But if I'm not Muslim, then I'm not going to give a woman that kind of power. This doesn't sound like the chauvinist that is being stereotypically promoted when you think of Islam. And when you mention Islam and women's rights in the Muslim world, no. This man's talking about the control that wives have over the husbands. And it's just understood. We had this conversation in a public place and nobody disagreed with him. But he said to me, there's no reason to marry in a case like that if you're not Muslim, because they got too much control. I asked him what was going on in his nation, and he said right now the women in my country have the rights that Islam gives them, and they're also getting the so-called rights that the Western world would give them, i.e. the right to cheat. Starting to get all these rights. So now it's to the point that the woman could probably get away with marrying two men. But if a man has a girlfriend, or if he is discussing marriage with a second wife and he's married to the first one, he can be in all kinds of trouble. They're getting power to hurt men that aren't hurting them, and it's getting bad. That's what he told me. I said, wow. So who's initiating many of the divorces now? And he said, for the most part, it's women initiating the divorces. They can get them easily, and they can take what, sometimes they can take what they want. And I said, oh God. Okay, yeah, it's over. Marriage is over in your country too. This thing is spreading throughout the Muslim world. I sat in a KFC with a Muslim brother from the UK. And he told me that he was a virgin, and he's in his 30s. And he said, I don't think I'm ever going to get married because here I am, a virgin, and it is hard. It's difficult. But while I'm a virgin and I was actually obeying the rules of God and I didn't fornicate, I'm finding out that most of these women out here fornicating. Who the hell am I going to marry? All I got to do is say, I don't want a woman that's fornicated. And then that just cuts down, it cuts out so many. The ones that are left are likely to be liars, saying I never fornicated and they did. And I asked him, how do you know about this? And he told me, I know because of my sister. My sister knew a lot of these different women. And one of the reasons she wasn't close friends with many of them is because they would fornicate. And the women, when they fornicate, they don't really hide it from each other. They just hide it from the men. But my sister would find out these women fornicating, and now she did not friend. She just knows them, and that's it. But she was telling me how dangerous it was, trying to warn me. And when I asked her how bad it was, she told me, the Alim, his wife slept with 5 boyfriends before she married him. This guy, his wife had a boyfriend and fornicated with him. They used to do it all the time, even unprotected. This lady here, she had boyfriends. She fornicated. She wasn't a virgin when she married her husband. And it cracked him up because he knew these men, and he knew that none of them knew that their wives had done this. He also, from knowing some of the men, he knew the men were not fornicators. Now, it's hard to know anything with 100% certainty. But he could not have imagined them fornicating. And the funny thing is, I had to ask myself, if these women are out here fornicating, and so many of them are fornicating, yet so few men are fornicating, then who are these women fornicating with? A few men. So they're taking turns, sharing a few men. And then when it comes to marriage, they don't want to share a husband with one other woman that they trust. Wouldn't want to do it. In this case, I'm saying that feminism is starting to interfere with the marriages of the Muslim. The feminist movement of disbelieving women, which was a reaction to the chauvinism of disbelieving men, is now beginning to interfere in the marriages of the Muslims. I'm going to tell you this, because now I got to talk to all women in general when I talk about this. To all women in general, you must understand that you can talk about equal rights and justice and equal access to opportunities and resources and equal pay for equal work. These are fair and just things, and justice only makes unjust people unhappy. Just people are happy with justice. Naturally, by definition, we got that. We understand that. But when you start talking about advancing women into the workplace, even forcing them into the workplace, and then forcing them up the ladder, the corporate ladders, and you do not tell them that you're going to have to understand that this hypergamous instinct that you may have now it is no longer necessary, you simply put a stop to marriages. That's what winds up happening. Now understand this. Men have, throughout civilization, about half of men have been celibate, to be honest with you. Some say, well, how come we never got used to it? Well, celibate men don't have children. So even if men get used to being celibate, because they're used to it, they don't pass this trait on. So it can't, by definition, it cannot necessarily become a genetic trait. But half of men have still been celibate because half of them, every generation, died without having any children. And they were, generally speaking, they died and they were virgins too. It's hard to prove in every case, but when people analyze the DNA, they find that there were about half as many male ancestors to the human species as there were female ancestors. Now, every individual has the same number, of course, but the population in general has half as many male ancestors. This means that most of us were fathered by half of the men from each generation. That's what that means. But we were mothered by most of the women from each generation. That's what that means. So a few men were going around here banging most of the women. Married, fornicating, whatever it was, sexual contact was happening between the majority of women and about half of the men, even less in some cases. That's what they've been able to figure out. This is what hypergamy does. Hypergamy tells women, eliminate more, at least, but definitely, but usually more than the bottom half of the men. And by bottom, I don't necessarily mean in terms of character. I don't mean that. By bottom, I mean just in terms of muscle mass and money. That's it. That's what they're looking for. Muscle mass and money. Eliminate the bottom half financially, but this is the funny thing though. You still have guys that don't tend to make it in terms of money, but they have these carefree lives, and women are just charmed by them. And they're the ones that oftentimes were fathering the babies. And the resources that went into raising the babies came from men that these women were not very attracted to, when they were ovulating at least. So this means that a lot of times, whether knowingly or deceitfully, many men were raising children that were not theirs. That's what this meant. Now, male chastity means that a lot of brothers and sisters don't know each other. That's not fair. I mean, male inchastity, I should say. I'm sorry. Male promiscuity means that a lot of siblings never meet each other. Female promiscuity means that a lot of men deceitfully or knowingly raise children that are not theirs. And the men that are usually doing the raising are not the ones that the women are actually attracted to. Men are learning this, ladies, and now men are starting to say, we don't give a guck what your excuses for it is. We don't care if it's instinctive and you can't help it. We're not taking that deal anymore. Many men are now beginning to say, we are only going to raise children that we sired. If we did not stick it in and spray the cervix and conceive the baby, we ain't feeding the baby. So whatever men you decide are not attractive enough to breed are the same men that are not responsible to feed. And I like that. Unfit to breed, not responsible to feed. I'm going to be using this. And so now I did marry a widow once. She had 3 babies, 3 children, I should say. One was very young, but she was a widow. Her husband didn't kill himself, and none of them killed the husband. The children didn't kill him, she didn't kill him. He was just working a job, and there was an electrical accident. And I felt bad for the children. I kind of felt bad for her too. But we hit it off. We married. And I didn't look at the kids as you know, some other guy's kids per se, because he was dead. She didn't go out there and ride the cock carousel and just get pregnant and then bring me the kids along later on. Hey, if you're a real man and you want me, then you're going to take care of my babies. It wasn't like that. It was more like, I'm a widow, so they don't have a dad. They're going to look to you as the dad because there is no one. You have no competition. If that's fine with you, then that's fine with me. And that was why it was okay in my case. When I look back in my own country, that's not what's going on. It is something completely different. In the States and in other Western nations, especially English-speaking ones, that's not what's happening. You've got a lot of these women running around here, and then they're riding a cock carousel. That's what the MGTOW call it. And they are simply taking men with whom they would want to breed, and they're getting pregnant with them. And then, not even by deception a lot of times, when they've had these babies, then they start looking for the guys that were too nice before. And they want to get with them, and they want these men to raise the babies. And the question I have to ask as a man, the question any man has to ask is, would I have been attractive to her if she did not have these babies from another man right now? If I would not have been attractive to her in that case, then I'm not attracted to her, period. So why should I be with her? And I'm already not responsible for the babies, even if I like the kids and they like me. I'm not necessarily responsible, and I'm not a replacement to the dad, and it's not fair to the dad that I act like that. I'm not fit to breed. I'm irresponsible to feed. More men are saying this. They don't care what reasons you women may give. They don't care what the excuses are. I mean, marrying and becoming widowed is altogether completely different. Marrying and then finding out that this guy cheated, well, it just depends. I mean, sometimes you know a man's cheating, sometimes you don't. That's why they call it cheating. But you make a choice, and that man is still alive, and you had his babies. Men have to ask themselves, am I actually her type to begin with before I get into a relationship with her and take responsibility for the children? This is something that men need to ask. And they're asking and they're saying, no, chances are I'm not a type, because if that was the case, I'd have my own kids. That's what's going on. And also, I've noticed that there's this trend. If a man says, I'm not dating women with children, other men's children, then there's all kind of backlash. But if a woman says, and she has kids, I'm not dating a man with kids, girl, I understand. You got to worry about your own babies. That's what they're saying. That's what women will say. And men are not interfering with what women say. When a woman with kids says, I'm not dating a man with kids, that man will say, yeah, okay, good luck. But he's not chewing her up and tearing her up. If he says, I'm not dating a woman with kids, and he has no kids, women get on his behind. Women with kids and women without kids get on his behind. But this feminism, it's going too far, and it's now affecting the Muslim communities. We already have it in our religion. Chauvinism does not have a place. Feminism doesn't have a place. The genders are different. They're equal under the law. They got different talents and responsibilities. That's it. I hope that this message has been of reminder and benefit. Assalamu alaikum.